Welcome to Launchpad. Paul Bradford here today with Jim and Amy Owens-Roach, classes of 00 and 03, respectively.
Yeah,
00. And thanks for coming to Westmont. Good to have you guys back on campus.
Yeah, it's so fun to be back.
Yeah, lots changed.
Yeah. Tell me what's changed. What are some things that you noted when you first got here?
Well, there's multiple new buildings.
Yeah.
And our go-to paths to get to VK, no longer there.
You're right.
Yeah, the little steps down are gone.
Gone, bye-bye.
To go around, yeah.
The big, huge bridge.
I had to look up a map as we were coming on campus to find the winter building.
Oh my gosh.
So
well,
we found our way.
But some things, as we were talking about downstairs, some things remain constant throughout the years, which is great.
Absolutely.
Well, now that you're back to Westmont, presumably for homecoming, and you spoke this morning in Professor Dunn's class, Deborah's class.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your initial kind of pathway to Westmont. How did you guys stumble your way onto campus?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I knew of Westmont because my sister went here, and she graduated in '92, I believe. And so I had seen her go through the Westmont years and kind of the types of people she met. And when it came time for me to find a school, I applied to a couple, one in the kind of major college department, like the big UC schools, and then I applied to Westmont and got accepted and decided I'd probably want to start with the small school approach and kind of try to create those relationships and went for it. And I was actually surprised they let me in here because I was like, wow, I got in. That's amazing. So that's what kind of led me here. And
I went to a small high school. I went to Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa, and several people had come to Westmont. So my senior year, I was here and got to see the campus, and my first thought was, it looks like summer camp. But I fell in love with it, and when I got accepted, it was just a natural path of, it was a small high school, so it was a growth and number of people here, but it still was in that small school feel that I really loved about my high school. So, and my sister did the opposite. She went to she went to Boulder. So she went from a small school to a really big school, and she's 4 years older than me. So I was able to see that and see how that played out, and I wanted to stay with a small school and that intimate feel.
Well, along those threads of, in your case, you went hyper small to medium small, as opposed to your sister.
Yeah.
What are some things about, if you're thinking back, what does your college experience make sense to you, and what was totally different that you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I would say, college for me, a couple things. The classes that I took, I knew I wanted to be in media, and I'm in radio, and so my comm major really prepared me well for understanding more like mass and interpersonal communication and all of that. I took a great class of public speaking that I use all the time, as I'm up doing pitches in front of a group, whether it's 2 people or 20. But I think for me, it was the biggest thing I got out of college that I didn't expect was just applying yourself and sticking to it and sticking to a path. And that goes to, I graduated a semester early, so I was in and out in 3.5 years, and, but I still stayed, I didn't want to get a real job, my last semester. So I lived the college life still, but applying yourself. I think that's really what I got most out of my college experiences, because then you get into the real world of work experience.
Jim, how about you? What was different, or good or bad, about what your expectations of college? Yeah.
What took me by surprise was you kind of go to college thinking, I'm going to study and I'm going to learn something useful to apply to a job, or I'm going to go in and I'm going to learn, and then I'm going to come out and be smarter. But when I got done, when you kind of have the benefit of kind of hindsight, I realized it was so much less of what I learned, and I just sharpened as a human, as a person. It was kind of the peripheral things that sunk in for me, that I didn't realize in the moment that was actually happening, but it was through the types of people I met, the relationships I built that are, there's 5 guys that I went to school with here that are still my 5 best friends, and those guys and girls, whether I realized it or not, at my time here, I just became my mom always says when I left Westmont, she's like, you got like a brain transplant. Like you are a different human than when you went to that school. And I think she was right. And it was so much for the better.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I got out and I just felt like, wow, I'm such a more developed person. I don't remember anything from my classes, but man, am I a much better individual for it, you know? So that was something that was really surprising for me. And now when my kids go to school, to be like, hey, listen, like studying's important, but you really need to use that time to like define who you are and develop yourself and sharpen, you know, who you want to be.
So when you said that brain transplant, I thought back to after my freshman year here, and I went home for the summer, and my mom asked me, okay, so what did you learn after your first year in college? And
right.
I looked at her, and in the 1 nanosecond of wisdom that a then 19-year-old can muster, I said, I learned how much I don't know.
Yeah.
And she went, worth every penny.
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's exactly
So to your
it.
point, the brain transplant, that was my version of the brain transplant.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so time machine question. It's May of your respective graduation years. And you're about to walk the line to grab your diploma. Put yourself in that moment, and if you can, as best you can, and what do you recall about your hopes and fears for the road ahead?
Oh man, that is a interesting one. I remember, because I'd always known I wanted to get into the record industry, like way before I even came to Westmont. So that was always, I just had no idea what that looked like. And so for me, it was, okay, this is the end of the kind of safety net. Now I gotta like put it up. I gotta figure this out. So I remember thinking, okay, next is the big fear is the unknown of, especially with the career I wanted to enter, is like, now I've got to go and figure this out, you know? And so if I would kind of be able to talk to myself then, it would just be kind of like, you know, the stress levels were high then, they're high now. I've always been a worrier. So just be like, you're going to think you're going to struggle, and you are going to struggle in a good way, but it's going to be fine. Like, you're going to be fine. You're not going to sink. Like, no one really ever sinks. I mean, I guess some people do, but for the wrong reasons. But for me, it was like, keep your intentions good, work hard, you're going to be great. And, you know, that's ultimately been the case. It's like, don't stress out so much about this, you know? And
This is great.
Yeah.
And how about you? What's your reflective moment from walking across the line?
You know, I early in college, I really started to have the career conversations about what I wanted to do. And so I had a mentor that I became very close with towards the end of college, and he was in radio, and I knew I wanted to be in sales, and I didn't know what medium. And so I early on knew I wanted to actually randomly get into radio sales, and I had a passion for music, and I knew I would like a job that was a little bit more dynamic and free with my time, as opposed to sitting at a desk from 9 to 5. So when I was walking across that, I had already had my first job, and his suggestion was get into some sort of a medium, not radio. So I worked at Santa Barbara Magazine for a year. So I was in a different place, but I had had a full semester to kind of mess around for a little bit without being in class. And so I think I was a little bit different in my approach, but something that I had always had as kind of a saying that relates to what Jim was just talking about was be content but not complacent. And I think we've really made that a part of our lives of be happy with where you are, but always be pushing to do better or do more. And so I feel like I've been able to live that a little bit more in my life of, graduating from college and not knowing much and being okay with that.
Sure. No, that's great. How did either of you have internee type experiences or what were those like in your college years?
So I had an internship, I think it was my junior year summer, and it was a business-to-business agency, and I realized I got a lot out of it, but I realized I didn't want to be on the agency side, and I also wasn't interested in the B2B. I was more consumer that I was interested in.
That's code for business to business.
I said business to business.
You did.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what we try and encourage students is what some students might want to. I got the wrong internship, and I would say no.
There's never a wrong. Yeah.
Learning what
You can cross that off your list now.
Exactly.
Right. And you're not committed. Like when you get a job, like you got to stay there a year. Like when you have a full-time employee, no matter what, even if you feel like you got into it and it was, oh man, this is not what I signed up for, you got to stick with it for at least a year. And internships,
same gig.
You can try things without having that year commitment, you know, like just for your internship period of time.
I did an internship at Westmont as my senior year, and I did an internship in radio. In fact, I did Amy's job before she did her job.
Yeah.
And I was not cut out for it. I thought, at the time I was a senior at Westmont, I was like, radio seems cool, because I had a radio show here at Westmont with a couple knuckleheads. And
term of endearment.
yes, in the best way. And so I was an intern at Cruise here in town.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I was intern Jim, and I'd be on the air sometimes, or they'd send me out to do things that they didn't want to do
van
in
hits
public.
and
yeah, and I'd be the guy on the phone, like interviewing people, asking silly questions. But and I also did real intern work there, and I realized I really like this, and so I thought I wanted to be in promotions. Ended up, the owner or the general manager of the station pulled me and said, she's like, I really like you. Would you want to have a job here when you're done with Westmont? And I was like, she's like, you make a lot of money in radio sales. And I was like, I like money. And this is a fun place to be. So yeah, let's do it. And so I got hired as a sales account, a rep, and it was not for me, and I kind of knew it immediately. It was like, okay, the word radio is in my job title, but there's very little to do with that. And it was always a very creative person, and it just was like, it was not for me.
Yeah.
And so I had an opportunity to rise. That was my first job in the music industry while I was in radio. I was about a little less than a year in, and I was like one of those, you need to be here tonight. Join the tour. We need a drummer. And I was like one of those life moments, and I called Dad, and I was like, Dad, what do you think? And I will never forget, he said, go do it.
Yeah.
He was like, you'll never get that shot again. Yeah. And he's an amazing guy, but I was not expecting that answer.
You thought he was going to give you that
you got a job, stick with that job. And he was like, I was like,
just got a college education? You're not
and he was like, you got to do it, go.
Oh, wow.
And so so I did radio and realized I didn't want to do radio. And it was totally invaluable getting that opportunity to see how it all worked, and then it kind of was a bumper for me to go in another direction.
Did that experience inform what you're doing now from a different perspective? Does it feed your approach to the music industry?
Yeah, I'm sure there was some things I gleaned from that experience that I would actually have a hard time putting. Maybe even little things like the way program directors would look at demos. Like they'd get a demo from a band and they'd just be like, "Oh, cool, no address, no phone number." And I'd be like, "Note to self: always put contact information on your demos." Little things like that, and were good things that I pulled from that.
Awesome.
But
so I don't know if you guys saw last year's commencement address. Tom Nguyen, who's just a remarkable guy, a board member at Westmont, spoke to the students. And long story short, he grew up in South Vietnam. Mom and him were on one of the last helicopters off the country fell. Settled in around the Wheaton area. Long story short, comes to faith and has just. He had a great experience. He's a rock star in the finance business in New York City, and been head of Deutsche Bank in Vietnam, and went back to Vietnam, and just amazing professional path. And he got up in front of students, and you thought he was going to talk about all of the swing for the fences and do the whole thing, and he looked at everybody and just said, "I'm going to be the only person to tell you, in the face of all of the social media stuff that you students are confronted with, all the perfection, everybody posting about their massive successes, both personally and professionally, and the whole 9 yards, I'm going to tell you not to swing for the fences. I'm going to tell you to bunt."
Yeah.
And he let that hang for about 10 seconds until people went, "Oh, hey, what he said." It was so powerful. And he said, just keep bunting and keep bunting. I just thought it was a great
awesome.
framework. And I think about that sort of metaphor. Have you seen that bunting? How have you seen that metaphor play out in your?
Well, I could say my entire career has been bunting the whole way, you know, and then you get then you're like, all right, I'm on first base, I'm on second base. Like, okay, then you start to really see those successes. But I mean, for 6 years of my career, you know, it was local radio sales, which is not glamorous. You know, it's cold calling, it's walking into car dealers, it's not just closing the deal, but then also writing the copy, and you're a script writer, and you're also the promotions person, and then you're going and picking up the check, because if you don't get paid, you don't get, like, they're not paying you.
Wow.
So, you know, it was 100% commission for most of my career. But doing those things along the way, the hard work, other opportunities open up. I mean, I've been at the same company for 14 years, and they've been really good to me. You know, they've been really great because I've been good to them.
Sure.
Like, I worked hard and wanted to grow in my career. So, and also for social, you know, Jim and I have actually talked a lot about social, you know, in the last couple of years. But social, it's just a highlight reel. That's not real life.
Right.
You're posting the good, the big wins,
Sure.
all of that stuff. And it's hard to not compare yourself.
You never post like, had a tough phone call with mom today.
Yeah.
Picture of the phone.
Right. I come home, I'm exhausted, and my kids are melting down, and I'm like, that's not something I post. Or last night when my dryer broke and I have wet clothes all over my house, you know, I'm not
True
posting
story.
those things,
True
you know?
story.
So,
I got my first I hate you from my son.
yeah.
Things you don't.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've to a fault always been built to swing for fences, and I would always like get, especially as an entrepreneur, you want to get a home run right out of the gate, and you're always looking for those home runs. But in retrospect, you look back and see that the bunts really built a career.
Yeah.
And whether you want to admit that at the time or not, or even can see that at the time, you look back and you're like, wow, that little tiny record I did with that band that was a nobody when I hardly knew what I was doing, and I didn't really know, was terrified to do it, like that prepared me to do X. And like these little steps along the way, they really do prepare you. I, however, had a hard time, I still have a hard time seeing the bunts. Sure. Even though I know that there's steps, but it's like you're always wanting to do something really big and great, but the bunts are the most important parts in this analogy that really get you to where you want to be. Because otherwise, you're just going to be sitting around waiting for a while.
And sometimes the bunts you don't even think they're bunts.
Right.
Exactly.
You think, this is why am I burning cycles on this thing that this is not helping me.
Right.
Yes.
Until later in life when you go, and that's sort of the...
And also, when you're making mistakes early in your career, I'd much rather make it on the small things rather than the big things.
Yeah.
Like, when you are learning your craft and you're making these small mistakes and you're learning from them, then when you do get to that point where you can, hit that home run, you have all these learnings, and that has prepared you for that moment.
I feel like only in the last year have I felt like I am 100% confident in my job. Like when I walk into a studio with a band and we're about to make a record or something, I'm like, I know how this works. I know how to handle their meltdowns. I know how this board works. I know what a bass line should be like. I know how the drums should be played. I have no anxiety about, oh my gosh, when is someone going to find out that I have no idea what I'm doing?
Totally.
And to an extent, I still have no idea what I'm doing. But
it's the Malcolm Gladwell, like 10,000 hours.
Yeah, I've been doing it around 10 years, and it's like I've only lately been like,
I got
this. Yeah, and now it's exciting to think of the next 10 and what that will evolve into and things. But yeah, it helps along the way to take note of your progress and make sure you appreciate what you've done, because it's important.
Yeah. So, Amy, you're at iHeart Media, and you create artist-driven content and ad campaigns, and focused mostly on the automotive industry. Jim, you're producing, you're writing, and you got an Emmy to your name.
Yes.
And we're following up on this whole bunt thing, and one of the things that I tell students all the time is it's easy for someone of my age to look back over his shoulder and go, oh, that's how all of the little breadcrumbs of my life stitched together, the bunts, if you will.
Yep.
How have those, what's that breadcrumb trail like for you guys? How is that working in your life?
You want to take that one first?
Yeah, I would say relationships have been my breadcrumb. Relationships have evolved.
Stole my answer.
The relationships have evolved where that's really been my client base. I mean, I had a really close friend at work that knew someone at Honda, and I had something to pitch, so she introduced us, and then that relationship opened to Acura, and then next thing you know, we're in there pitching larger programs, and then I become kind of the auto person, and then next thing you know, I'm on this other team, and now I'm on Nissan, and so like all of my knowledge, and it really has been 100% relationship based, and I think it's important for people to recognize where that is, that it's not like like I haven't done this myself.
Yeah.
It has been the people that have helped me, the people that have believed in me and said, I need to introduce you to so-and-so. And then also taking personal responsibility of, I have a reputation, someone else put their reputation on me as well, and I need to follow up and be on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that mine kind of took two lanes. One, piggybacking on Amy's, is you look back and you go, wow, that one meeting I took 6 years ago, I ran into that person last week and they said, this happened to me this week. I hadn't seen a guy in 8 years. He was the head of A&R for Island. We re-met because he had heard of an artist I'm developing, and he contacted me, and it was like, had I not been the kind of person that you wanted to be in a room with 8 years ago, he wouldn't have been like, oh my gosh, I remember that guy, he was great, and call me and been like, hey, we want to sign your artist. And so you look back at these little breadcrumbs, and those that, you know, added up over time. There was a guy at Apple at Apple Music, who championed a lot of the bands I was signing several years ago, and then about 3 years ago, he called and said, hey, do you want to come work for Apple as a producer? And I said, yeah. So I did a year at Apple as a producer, and I look back and I'm like, when I got that job, I was like, how did I get here? And then I'm like, oh, it was Bruno at iTunes who liked my bands, and I engaged with him a lot, and he was like, you should come and work here. And it's just like, you look back and there's that thread. But the other thread is really, for me, looking back at things I thought I wanted to do, you know, and then those little breadcrumbs push you to the next. And I thought forever I wanted to be in a band, and I wanted to be a rock star. And then I got a bit of a taste of that early on and realized, like, this is not for me. Like, I like being at home. I don't like being on camera. I don't like being on stage.
You're on camera right now.
I know. I'm okay with it now. But I didn't like performing. So I'm like, why do I want to do this? So then it was like, okay, well, maybe I should stay in the studio where I love it. And then that was like, oh, I really enjoy the business side of the record industry and acquiring intellectual property. So I should start, you know, signing publishing. And so it just was all these things that just kept snowballing. And you look back and you're like, bing, 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 bing.
And then you go, oh, that's how it all unfolded.
Yeah.
So
Really cool.
That's
yeah.
the fun part, and the difficult part is when you're 22. You don't have many breadcrumbs to rely on, and that's why there's just showing up and just doing it. And the relationship piece, I can completely.
I would add one thing else to that is, in terms of the relationship element, is when you are working with people within business and you have an objective, also think about what their objective is and try to meet them and build their objective into it, because you may think you're going to be on sales side. Then all of a sudden you start working with, like in my business, like you start working with a lot of labels and artists, and then but you're thinking about what they need out of the relationship, that your breadcrumbs could take a total left turn, you know, and so when you're the person that they get, like, oh, you get this whole picture, like you're not just thinking about what you need out of this, that also is a big opportunity waiting to happen.
Yeah, you've invested in others, so it's just reciprocity. They're more, you know, it's the old adage, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar.
Oh, right.
And as you just do good stuff for people, and it comes around. And
Absolutely.
I've done this last year or two for me, same thing. It's just been picking up the phone and calling people and just having a conversation. So can you help? I can't tell you how many folks in this Singapore thing I was telling you about, just cold call people and say, I got this thing, here's what we're doing. And they'd say, sure, I'm happy to help. It just blew me away. But again, some of those were relationship driven, some were just knock, knock, knock.
Right.
See how it goes.
You never know unless you ask, you know.
Well, so popping back up to the macro of Westmont, and how did the framework of this place, how do you feel like it prepared you or shape you to pursue the stuff that you're doing?
I'm going want to take that one first?
It's like a little bit going back to what you had talked about earlier, like becoming a better human being. I think it helped me figure out my priorities. It's like, you know, friends and family and faith, and making that a part of my career and not just part of my personal life was a really instrumental part of being here. But I would say, though, that the actual academic elements of it have been incredibly influential in my growth, you know. And I was just talking to Dr. Dunn earlier today. I said, there was that one book and it has stuck with me, and it was called
Amusing Ourselves to Death.
Amusing Ourselves to Death. And I think about that Neil Postman book all the time, you know, and it was a required reading and I loved it. And then, you know, there was a couple of other like funny stories that Dr. Dunn and I were just saying, but the academic as well as like shaping you as a person that has your priorities in the right order and understand what it is to be a good person living in this world, you know, and or trying to be.
Yeah, I think for me the academics were huge because it was difficult in the best way, the way a good college should be, and I was not a bad student, but I was not a great high school student. So I was like, wow, this is really hard, but I need to rise to this for several reasons, you know, because I'm here. And but more importantly, for me, it was just being here, and the types of people that are here blew me away. My first 2 weeks, it was like, oh my gosh, this is an incredible group of, you know, 1,200 kids, and just over the 2.5 years for me as a transfer, those qualities just start to wear on you, and you just become somebody completely different in my case, the absolute best possible way. You know?
With your brain transplant?
Yeah, and I got a brain transplant. Yeah. No, but it really, for me, was the relationships that I took away from here changed my life. Forever, never. And I would have never met her, obviously.
Yeah, we met
so
at
that's important.
There you go.
Yeah, we did. Well, I came back and I was 4 years out.
I was a senior.
I was like, you know, I think it's time to settle down. I'm going to go back up to Westmont.
Okay.
Find go fishing. I'm just kidding. We met out of the school. But
And you guys have 2 kids?
yeah, we have 2 kids.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
6 and 4.
6 and 4, and Kennedy and Beckett, and yeah, we're a busy household. 2 full-time working parents and 2 young kids.
So you know that the 2 kids is not additive. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's
And
1 + 1
We found that out.
We found that out very quickly. I was like, this is not double the work.
Oh my gosh.
This is quadruple.
It's so much fun.
Well, so back to your 18-year-old-ish self or your 22-year-old self, and what, if you could tell that person what not to worry about, what would that be?
I'm not much of a worrier.
I take all the worry for both.
Yeah.
You absorb it all.
You know, at 18, I kind of looked at life as like, oh, I'm just going to go through life and figure this out, you know, and so I've not been a big worrier. I mean, I get stressed with like work stuff and my head starts twitching and the whole thing, but I'm not like, I don't internalize things.
Yeah, you know, I would say for me, it was always like, it was always a stress for me because I knew I was getting into a business that was very shaky on a good day. And so for me, it was like, how am I going to make this work? But I found, you know, and it didn't work right away, nor, you know, does it for a lot of people. You have to really commit and dig in and then stick around, and you start to see the fruits of your labor. But, you know, it was the worry of how am I going to pull this off? It was the worry of like, am I good enough for this? You know, and so I'd say to my 18-year-old self, like, you're good enough for this. Like, you're good enough to pursue the things that you are unsure about, because the people that once you get, you know, in the industry and you meet the people towards the top, you're like, oh, they don't know what they're doing either. You know what I mean? It really is. It's like, nobody knows what they're doing. We're all just here trying to do our best. And that was the big takeaway for me. It's like, you meet these people, like, how on earth do you tie your shoes in the morning? And you are running all of these people, or you are, you know, you have written how many hits, and you're just kind of like, just know that, talking to myself, know that you're capable and
Just
go for it. Show up. You just show up.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming
Thank
back
you.
and
Thank
sharing some time
you.
Chad.
Absolutely.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much. Yeah, it was
thank
super
you.
fun.
Homecoming the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Is that roughly
Yeah, we're
the
here for
plan?
homecoming and
A couple of friends, and we rented a house, so it'll be fun. Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna go to one more class tomorrow. See Dr. Spencer.
Fantastic.
Yeah. it's
Well,
been
thanks
so
for
fun.
having us.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you.